All right. Hello and welcome to Friday Digest this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rebecca Rehr, the Director of Climate Policy and Justice here at Maryland LCD. I'm really excited about today's conversation with our guest, Camille Burke, who wears many hats, but is here today as the chair of the Maryland Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities. Before we jump in, just a few background notes on these conversations. Our goal with these Friday Digests is to provide you with information, tools, and resources to be an informed and active advocate. We also want the agenda for these virtual meetings to be driven by your interests and needs. So please keep us posted about what you want to hear. We'll provide a survey in the chat at the end of the call, which is probably the easiest way to provide this information, but please do be in touch via email or follow us on social media. As you join today, please type your name in the chat and where you live. And as we move through the half an hour we have together, please type your questions and comments in the Q&A or the chat box, and we will try to get to as many as we can. So with that, I think we can move into our dialogue. Thanks again for joining us this afternoon, Camille.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. This is exciting.
I think so too. And so first up, I just wanted to ask you to talk about the mission of the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities and how you've seen things change or not during your tenure as chair.
This is so the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities is an advisory board. We advise the governor and the legislature around environmental justice, and you all will hear me say EJ quite a bit. So we advise them, and so it can better be incorporated into the work of the state. And it's not just the work of MDE, it's every single agency. We coordinate with a host of other commissions, the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, the Maryland Health Equity Commission, and we make recommendations in our annual report. In recent years, EJ has become the in thing, which is absolutely wonderful. The conversations have become more and more robust, and people are really interested in it. And we've absolutely capitalized on that every single chance that we had. We've also gotten the opportunity to kind of help MDE become more user-friendly, as I call it. They've developed a screening tool recently, which was huge for them, and something that any average regular citizen like myself and you could go in and kind of see what's going on in their neighborhood. We're also working on collaborating to develop a methodology that makes sense to identify communities that are disproportionately affected by climate impacts. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that we have is just it's shifting how people think about environmental justice and having people have what I call an EJ lens with all of the work that they do. And we've done our best to incorporate and literally insinuate ourselves into all of those conversations, but it's just a paradigm shift in having people think a little differently about environmental justice.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that, sort of the methodology for identifying sort of where these issues are taking place across the state, because I know that's been a challenge. And frankly, some people have used that as an excuse for inaction. If you can't identify where the issues are, then we don't know what you're talking about, or sort of. And so it was really interesting last year to be a part of the conversation to actually in statute define terms overburdened and underserved communities, and how much that shows up in legislation this year, so that resources can actually be targeted where they're needed most. And it's really made a difference being able to define what we mean when we say overburdened and underserved. And so I know the commission was very involved in those conversations.
Absolutely. It was incredibly difficult. And it's still something that we're tackling. And we recognize that even though it's codified in statute, it's still a living, breathing definition. So there's loads of room for us to move and kind of change that, and also hear from those communities that are affected or that are overburdened and underserved. So, and
since we are now, sort of, we talked about that happening last session, and we're in the midst of legislative session now. Sort of, can you talk a little bit more about how you see the role of the commission during session, and maybe weighing in on legislation?
Sure. So we are in a really unique position. We actually get to advise, we comment, we of course say yay or nay, whether or not we support. There are some things that we just kind of sit back and watch the progression of, because we want to kind of watch before we chime in. We are lucky enough to have a really great legislator, and I have to give a shout out to Delegate Regina Boyce, who has not missed a meeting. So it's really amazing to have someone on the ground telling us what those discussions are. Make no mistake that there are a lot of late night emails. There are a lot of late night phone calls with myself, Delegate Boyce, some of the other delegates that want to sponsor legislation, but don't really understand what those words mean in the community. So we are uniquely positioned, and it's not something that just happens. And you just mentioned this. And one of the great things is that legislation sometimes it takes a year or two to incubate before it comes to fruition. So it's something that it may not come to pass in this particular session, but I assure you, stuff that didn't pass last session, we're looking at again this session. So it's just a really cool, unique position to be in, to kind of be a part of whatever that roadmap is and the place where Maryland is going for the next 3 to 5 years. It's also important for me to mention that this outlasts whoever the governor is. This actually outlasts whoever the delegates are and whoever is in charge at MDE. It's something that's kind of interwoven into the future of Maryland.
Yeah, and you know, the CEJC not only comments, it has the ability to advise governor and the legislature, but also the commission has been written into bills recently.
Lots of bills. We've been given lots of work lately.
Right. And so I wanted to ask, does the commission have what it needs to do this amount of work? And sort of as you get asked to do more, it's an all volunteer commission. Absolutely. And it is an advisory commission, whereas some other commissions have regulatory authority. You're an advisory. Yes. Do you have what you need as a commission to fulfill your charge, and plus the additional things you've been asked to do in legislation?
So the quick answer is no, absolutely not, because you're absolutely correct. We're an advisory board and we're all volunteer. However, one of the other amazing things that come out of this is that we have dedicated staff at MDE. And because of that dedicated staff at the Maryland Department of Environment, the other state agencies, of course, don't want to be left out. So now we have dedicated EJ folk in other state agencies. It was an idea that was slow to move a couple years ago, but now the Department of Planning and other places, we literally have a person that we can go to. So we are always, unfortunately, short membership because we are an advisory board. It's all volunteer. We've had our membership expand to 26, and you've sat in on some of those meetings. They are robust meetings, and we don't hardly ever agree, but we all agree about kind of where Maryland is going environmentally and the part we want to play in it. But there are certainly always openings, especially from the legislature appointments. The governor's appointments are done, but there are quite a few appointments, and I will never miss an opportunity to publicly beg, please, 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 please join us. Yeah. If you're interested. Maryland is one of the very unique states where you can go from the beach to the mountains, literally. And we want to represent all of that because each of those communities have very specific environmental challenges. And we want to represent, I love when my folk from the Eastern Shore chime in and say, hey, wait a minute. Did you think about this? And those are things, because I sit in Baltimore City, don't necessarily think about. So if anyone wants to serve, and I mean serve, because we work, make no mistake, we're one of those commissions that we work early, often, and on weekends sometimes. Yeah. Those legislature appointments, reach out to whoever represents you. We would love to have you on the commission. So the quick answer is no, but.
Right, sure. And I know there's been a commitment from this administration to staff, for MDE staffing, right? Probably across agencies as well, but particularly MDE. Yeah. So hopefully that bodes well for the work that needs to get done, because a lot of the staffing issues have been around enforcement. And I think enforcement is a under-recognized piece of environmental justice, because you could pass the law, but if it's not being enforced in the communities that suffer the most from pollution, I think you're sort of adding on.
Absolutely. And I also will take this opportunity as someone who works for the Baltimore City Health Department. Enforcement is something all of the local health departments, and certainly we all need help with that. And we all are down staffing wise. We desperately need competent, qualified folk who are interested in making a change.
Yeah. And you mentioned now, so you work at the health department. So that's a good example of sort of where you said, environmental justice is sort of housed in Maryland at the Department of the Environment, but you mentioned Department of Planning. I think, Department of Transportation is involved. How do you see sort of these environmental justice happening across issues, and how agencies can better, either how they are working together or how they can better work together?
It's something, and I kind of said this earlier, it's a complete paradigm shift. It's thinking of EJ as something that not only happens because, literally thinking of EJ as something that affects all of us in everything we do. It's certainly, I have a public health lens, but I have an EJ lens as well. But it's something that happens at DNR, it's something that happens at planning, and it's getting, we recently met with transportation and literally having conversations about planting trees and thinking about how that affects the environment. And when people walk to work and ride a bike and that kind of thing, it's literally giving every agency an EJ lens, knowing that the environment is something that we all need and participate in. So it's getting people to think differently. And it has been a long road, and we have a long way to go, but people are just kind of you can see the light going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And one way people can participate is actually your meetings are open to the public.
Really, absolutely. We meet the last Tuesday of every month. We're about to meet this coming Tuesday. It's open. It's on the MDE website. We post the agenda, and there's always a huge public comment section. And we would love for the public to comment. We also want to go out into the community. We've been asked by a couple communities to come visit. Curtis Bay is one of them. And we've been asked last summer. I know that I went to the Eastern Shore and went to chicken farms. I will never think of chicken ever the same way again. Standing there with the smell and the feathers, it was just a completely eye-opening, life-affirming, changing experience. So we will go. And because of the pandemic, we couldn't go, but we're looking to actually come to the community and listen. We would love to be invited. We won't come unless you invite us, though. So,
and that happened at a meeting not that long ago. There was a mayor
Eagle
who
Harbor, which I didn't know much about. Eagle Harbor, Maryland reached out. He sat in on the meeting, and he is literally on our schedule because he has some very specific issues, and we purposely had him send those issues to Devin, who is our actually assistant secretary and our representative at MDE. And he's coming back to talk to us about how those issues were addressed.
So I think that's a real world example of coming, if you're listening and you have an environmental justice concern in your community, and you give public comment at the commission meeting, it's a real way to have direct input and have some action come out of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to go back for a minute to legislation. And you mentioned, Delegate Regina Boyce, who is the sponsor of the Climate, Labor, and Environmental Equity Act of 2023.
Yes.
And that one, that bill, there was a hearing in the Senate yesterday, Senator Michael Jackson's bill in the Senate. And that bill takes a look at the way that MDE does permitting and says, how I talk about it is sort of like comparing it to a visit to your primary care physician. When you go, you have your annual checkup, and then before any course of treatment or action from your physician, they usually ask you sort of about your pre-existing conditions. And sort of that's what the bill does, is look at if there's a new permit or a permit renewal application coming in with an EJ score. If there's a high EJ score, you sort of ask what else is going on in the community before you make a decision about that permit. So what have the conversations been like about that bill at the commission?
Those conversations have been hot and heavy, and actually they were hot and heavy last year. There's a current issue in Baltimore City where there is a funeral director that wants to put a crematorium in a neighborhood. And I have sat in on 6 of those meetings, and MDE has not granted the permit, but the neighborhood has literally risen up and taken such action that we've had to kind of stop and certainly listen to them, not just the business owner, and think about how that particulate matter or how anything that happens and because it's such a dense neighborhood, we've had to listen to how it will affect the neighborhood. So that bill is on time, but this conversation about looking at how it affects the entire environment has been going on for quite some time. So, and we're still involved in that. The other thing that this bill forced me to do is also, I think MDE and we also can do a better job of looking at local statutes and how that fits into the state statutes and permitting. I hear often that that's not what we do at MDE. This is locally, what has to happen locally. And I can tell you that I didn't understand, or I didn't have that frame of reference first. So now that I have that frame of reference, I look locally, have the conversation. So even if MDE does the permitting, it always doesn't necessarily affect you on the local level. So some of it is not only be engaged on the state level, but also with your local folks as well.
Yeah. And we hear a lot about that, particularly around zoning. I think zoning really is again, huge. Underrepresented in the conversation around environmental justice, but the zone, people really need to, because zoning happens and then it's 10 years later till the next, plan is written, right? So if these things are etched, it's kind of etched in stone and there's nothing we can do about it. So I think, zoning is a place where we really need to pay more attention as well.
I absolutely agree. I mean, we've had, and also a part of that zoning and permitting discussion is conversations around stormwater. That was huge. And still having those and advancing stormwater. And also you and I talked about the tree commission and tree planting and how that fits into zoning and where you can plant that. The tree commission is a part of MDE, but we are planting trees or planning to plant trees close to larger transportation hubs, which is MDOT. So there's just so much crossover. And I'm not sure people think about it. It's just something we naturally do. So those conversations are happening, but they certainly need to be elevated and we need more community participation.
And I do want to remind people, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And I want to just for a minute we got in there really local, and now I'm just going to ask a question sort of from a bigger step back, which is federally, there's been a lot more emphasis on environmental justice, and that particularly through the Justice 40 initiative and making sure that there's funding allocated to communities overburdened and underserved, that there's actually reserved funding for those communities. And so how has the shift in federal focus on environmental justice changed the way the commission is able to act?
Absolutely. One of the great things about Justice 40 is it's not just an environmental justice lens, but it also is having a real conversation on environmental racism, which isn't something that we have had openly and honestly as often as we should be having. And I can only certainly give it to you from the Baltimore City purview, but we're certainly watching the EPA come in and have community conversations first. And that's huge. Before that, it would be, we put together a map, we looked at a couple of things, and this is a community that we're going to help. So it's changed the way that not only we do business, but also the federal government looks to do business and also interact with folk that are on the ground and in that space doing the work already, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And it's an important reminder that the mapping tools really have accelerated the conversation on environmental justice. But, when we look at the tenets of environmental justice about fair treatment and meaningful involvement, that meaningful involvement piece really needs to be, that community engagement piece is a critical part of developing policy tools, solutions, and implementation.
Yeah, one of the other amazing things is I'd like to think that one of the byproducts is that we're spending time doing what I'd like to call growing future and budding environmentalists. There's there's a concerted effort to be more engaging with young people in this area, because I definitely want someone to kind of carry this work on. And it's not a bunch of us old people, and I never thought I can call myself an old person, sitting around having conversations about the environment, but it's young people in Curtis Bay and young people in Eastern Shore standing around and looking and going, my neighborhood is sick, I want to know why, or we have a cluster of something, I want to know why. And there's just a lot more room for those conversations than ever before. So that's amazing and really exciting for me to watch.
Yeah, and we so appreciate that as well. And I know I remember the Climate Solutions Now Act was a really big bill. And part of that's how we got overburdened, underserved defined, and also it expanded the Chesapeake Conservation Corps to include environmental justice projects and, sort of a focus in communities that need, that type of work. So I think that's one way it's happening. Yeah, I think I want to go back to something you mentioned about flood management, because there was another bill yesterday that is flood management and Justice 40, which is an expansion of MDE's comprehensive flood management grant program, and where it was increasing the amount of dollars in that program and making sure that 40% of that goes to overburdened or underserved communities. So just to mention for folks, if you're looking to get engaged on environmental justice issues in the state legislature this session right now, check out the Maryland LCV website, where we have information about our legislative priorities, which includes some information on these bills, on the Climate, Labor, and Environmental Equity Act specifically. And so check that out. There's still the House hearing side. So we did the Senate side, and then there's the House side. So if you're tuning in and want to weigh in, there is opportunity to do so. We are getting some audience questions. So it looks like, it's interesting. We got a question. This is the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities. And I know, that's a big part of the mission as well. And there's a question about state or federal programs that incentivize developers to increase sustainable practices. So a lot of times we talk about, carrot and stick, right? So
absolutely,
if we're talking about permits and changes to permits based on what's going on, but there might also be this other side, which is incentives for developers to do better. So what are the conversations like that at the commission?
So we have just started to touch on that. To be perfectly honest, we haven't spent a lot of time on that. So I will certainly give you a quick, I don't know right now. Send me that question. And if that person wants to reach out, I certainly will take a look and kind of see what's coming up or look back at some prior conversations, but it has not been something that we've talked a lot about, to be honest.
Yeah, and I know that sort of that thread of conversation has been going on about, is it penalizing folks for doing the wrong thing, or is it like, how can we develop more incentives to do the right thing? And I think, I know there's a lot of interest in, there's both are important, but really like leaning in and
absolutely
giving the incentives. The incentives piece is really important. So what other I know you all just finished your annual report, from last year. So what are you looking forward to in 2023 for the commission?
I'm looking to becoming fully staffed, and I want members. Looking to post, and I do mean post-pandemic, kind of getting back out into the community. Going to Eastern Shore was amazing and eye-opening, and I want to do more of that. Certainly enjoy engaging and having meetings online, but I think we need to be out in the community. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that. Also looking forward to just upcoming changes. We've got a brand new governor We've got a brand new secretary at MDE. So I'm always curious to kind of see new directions that we're going in. One of the things you mentioned is that MDE hopefully will be able to kind of staff up and do more enforcement. If something is happening more at the state, it trickles down to those of us in the local jurisdictions and kind of takes the burden off of what we do. So I'm certainly looking forward to that. I'm always looking forward to session. I'm always amazed at what comes out of session. Always, even the things that don't make it to the end are things, as I said, we kind of hold on to see what's coming. I love when people really sit down and work with their legislator to kind of put something together. I'm always amazed of where the need is. And one of the great things is that we are needs-based and needs-driven. And I'm not sure people realize that. So I'm just kind of looking forward to the community helping us to kind of set our agenda.
Yeah, and I want to touch on session for a minute because it's this one conversation that's been happening a little bit is the public's ability to weigh in. You as a commission, your last Tuesday of the month, come join us. It's public comment. We're needs-based, needs-driven. And I've seen that in your leadership of the commission. Really, that's true. The process to weigh in the legislative process is a little trickier. There's different deadlines for testimony in the Senate and the House. You got to sign up for I think a silver line. I mean, I hesitate to use that term with pandemic, but one thing that's come out of the pandemic is the opportunity to do virtual testimony on bills, Absolutely. Which I think is a huge, I think a huge benefit to the residents of Maryland, Maryland voters who want to weigh in because it's tricky to get to Annapolis sometimes. So just quickly, your thoughts, because again, this meaningful engagement piece on the ability for folks to weigh in during the session on these important topics.
First, if you've never been to Annapolis, you got to go once. You at least got to go once or twice. You have to, and that is what it is yours. It is your house. It is what you pay for. You got to go once, and you never know. And Rebecca, you can attest to this, who you're going to see walking through those halls. You actually might run into your representative. Who knows? You should go. But absolutely, I will tell you, as a private citizen, if I had not been involved in this, jumping through the hoops of how you testify, what day, what committee it sits in. I was lucky enough. Delegate Clarence Lamb was amazing early enough in my CJAC career to literally do an infographic for us of how you testify. And we were so lucky to get that, and going from the House side to the Senate side. So I will be the first to say that it is a daunting process. Yeah. And it's certainly something that definitely needs to be simplified. Yeah. And that's coming from me as a Maryland citizen. It also speaks to the need to work on some of our broadband issues. And we're doing that statewide, but also some of our tech issues. We're still having that issue across the state of Maryland, so people can continue to virtually testify. I mean, snail mail is just that, but it's a process, and there are a lot of hoops you have to jump through. Yeah, so maybe with you there. Yeah, yes. So one of the ways people can weigh in, though, is through letting your elected officials know what issues you care about. They listen to you. So check out the Maryland LCV website to see what issues you can weigh in on. We have a couple action alerts up right now. And just to wrap us up, I know we're at time. So, this is the last Friday of Black History Month. And the theme for this year's Black History Month is Black resistance. And the environmental justice movement has its foundations in Black resistance and predominantly Black communities standing up to say no more pollution. So just as we wrap up, take a moment to reflect on this year's Black History Month theme and where the environmental justice movement is today. Sure. The theme is heavy. It carries a lot of responsibility. The first thing that usually comes to mind for me is ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And that happens every day. And that happened in communities in the South and communities across America. Ordinary people saw a problem, saw an issue, and wanted to make their communities better. And we all can do that. It certainly forces you to pay homage and look back and certainly be very grateful and thankful for all of those who have come before. But it also gives you a chance to kind of plot a roadmap to forge a better future. It's something that humbles me. scares the hell out of me with this work because it has real world implications, but in the same space, it strengthens me and gives me a good reason to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well, if that's not a note to end on, I do not know what is. I so appreciate that as something people can reflect on, as Black History Month comes to a close and as we celebrate Black history and Black future as all year long. So
Absolutely.
Camille, I just want to thank you so much for your time today, for everything that you do in the Baltimore City Health Department as chair of the commission, really opening up this space to have this conversation today and for your ongoing work. So I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. And we're looking forward to seeing people on Tuesday or inviting them in as members. So please join us.
Excellent. And so just thank you all for tuning in. Check out the Maryland LCV website, sign up for our Conservation Weekly. The link will be in the chat. Thank you for everything that you do, and fill out the survey so we know what else you want to hear during these conversations. And join us next week when we'll be talking about offshore wind with Delegate Lori Charkoudian and Chuck Cook, who's with the Business Network for Offshore Wind. So again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.